Hey, what's going on, everybody? Nicky Skevich here with Daily Fantasy Winners. We're back for the next edition of Tee to Green, and it's for one of my favorite tournaments of the year in the Memorial Tournament. This is Jack's tournament at Muirfield Village in the Columbus area, a tournament that is very popular among the PGA Tour pros for obvious reasons, just because it's Jack's tournament. But a lot of people really love this golf course in Muirfield Village. It's actually probably like my favorite non-major, non-WGC tournament. Maybe I've said that about a few other tournaments in past episodes, but if you made me choose one stroke play event that's my favorite that's not a WGC or not the Players Championship or not like a major type of thing, this is probably it. I'm a big fan of Jack Nicklaus design courses. I've played a few of them before in the past, and I always seem to really like Nicklaus courses just because they're designed essentially in a sense that if you hit a really good shot, you're going to be rewarded, and if you hit a bad shot, you're really going to get punished. That sounds like a really simple concept, like on the surface, but the truth of the matter is you can end up playing like a lot of golf courses where like when you get into like tournament conditions on like really difficult courses where you can just run into a lot of like BS variants, or you can just run into courses where they have to like try to trick it up to make it like be difficult or things like that. Nicklaus courses really aren't like that. The greens aren't like BS. Like they are difficult, but they're not like, you know, the type of greens where, you know, they're not like US Open type greens or like Oakmont or anything like that where they just end up becoming like complete nonsense. They're very well designed in that sense. There are a lot of there's a decent amount of hazards on this course. There are a lot of forced carries actually on this golf course in terms of like creeks running in front of the green, or just like you'll have a shot where there's just like rough or mounds like in front of the green or bunkers, and there just aren't many holes where like there's just a fairway strip like running up to the green, so you can't like roll shots up onto the green. And I emphasize this because strokes gained approaching the green really big time shows up here. It's one of the biggest ones of the year. It's probably like the biggest one, or one of the biggest ones that's not like a quote unquote like ball strikers type golf courses where it's like a Florida type course where there's just like hazards like everywhere, you know, like on every hole like there would be on most Florida courses. So there are a decent amount of hazards on this course, just not like, you know, not like a Florida course. This course has a lot more elevation than a typical Florida course would be, obviously, being in Ohio. So in any case, so that's what we got going on for this week. The other statistic, interestingly, that shows up here, other than strokes gained approaching the green, is people who are actually really good at going for the green, but like not in terms of frequency, but in how what their percentage is, like how often are they hitting based upon the amount of attempts that they are taking in terms of going for the green in two. This makes sense actually for here when I first saw that, because there are 4 par 5s on this golf course. There are a lot of eagles actually at this course, being a par 72. And the par 5s are all like between 520 and 5. I believe the longest is like 570, maybe it was like 580. It's somewhere in that range. A couple of them are more eagleable than others. Like number 15 is going to be the most likely the heaviest eagle hole, with it being a downhill par 5, and I think that's like 520 some yards and everything like that. So there are a lot of opportunities for like everybody to go for the green if you do hit a good drive, put it in play, and you hit a good second shot. Like you're gonna have some chances at eagles. So there are a good amount of eagles. There are actually a good amount of birdies on this course as well. However, this course gives up the fewest amount of pars actually of all PGA Tour tournaments, believe it or not. So therefore, there are actually a reasonable amount of bogeys. It's around like top 10, top 15 on the PGA Tour, but it's like top 5 in double bogeys, and like top 5, maybe it was like top 6 or 7 or something like that in triple bogeys or more. So that's kind of how it works out here to being kind of like an average difficulty overall. It's kind of funny how it works out like that. It's somewhat like, I guess statistically, from just like the scoring standpoint, is it kind of plays out like a Florida golf course, even though it looks nothing like one. It's kind of interesting how that kind of works out here a little bit. And so it's not like penalty stroke avoidance is like that big of a deal here. It's just more the strokes gained approaching the green is really what shows up here. So with that in mind, we can move on in here into the top golfers here. So we'll talk about the top 5. I'll probably dive into the 9K range this week just because it's a little bit of a bigger tournament. But so Dustin Johnson here at 11,300, the favorite to win the tournament slightly by the odds makers. I believe he's 12 to 1 at most books. Like Jason Day's at like 14 to 1, and like Rory, Rose, and Thomas, and all those guys are like right there. You know, like there's a bunch of people like 20 to 1 or 25 to 1 or better, obviously, because everybody's playing well, or at least decently to a certain extent. So DJ is the odds-on favorite. I think that makes sense here, just because even though DJ hasn't like made like a ton of noise as of late, his recent performance is just fine. Tied for 17th at the Players for a course that's not really built for him. Tied for 16th at RBC. Played that because that's his new sponsorship, not really a course that's built for him. The week after the Masters, probably didn't put everything he had to it into that tournament, just from like a preparation standpoint. And T10 at Masters, tied for 7th at the WGC in Mexico. So DJ is playing perfectly fine, even though he hasn't made like a ton of noise. Statistically, obviously, you guys can see here. I will actually, I'll slide this over so you can see. I apologize about that. From a strokes gained statistics, strokes gained total, he is second, just behind Jason Day. Jason Day moves to number 1 in strokes gained total. That might have happened last week, actually, now that I think about it. But either way, DJ's though not number 1 there, no longer. But of course, he is number 1 in tee to green, off the tee, and still pretty good approaching the green. And he's pretty good in all the short game statistics too this year. Just so everything is going pretty well here for DJ. I have a sneaky suspicion DJ won't be like super highly owned here. It's not really a sneaky suspicion. I'm guessing that DJ won't be too highly owned, just because he's not clearly dominating. This isn't a golf course that really promotes length and everything like that. So I kind of have a feeling here that DJ, while is a very good play here by pretty much all accounts, he just wouldn't. I just don't think he's gonna get like garner a ton of ownership. Like, I'd be shocked if he was over 20%. He'll certainly be. There's still a high floor to him. Like, I'm sure he'll still be like at least like 13-14%, but be actually pretty surprised if it was over 20%. So I think he's a perfectly fine play. The only thing I can possibly say that's negative here for DJ is that the putter's slightly hot. But again, like I've mentioned that before, and I don't really look that much into it. He started using the the aim point thing, where like the if you're putting, like you stand behind the ball and you like walk up on a line and you put your like hand out or whatever like this, and you like put it up like to where the hole is at, and like you kind of put like a number on it, like a 1, a 2, or a 3, and it's like a mathematical way of just like dictating like you picking your spot on where you should be putting your ball with the break. Like, some pros are starting to use this concept. You can read more about it. That some players have started to try and do this. So Dustin Johnson actually just started using this, and he says he really likes it, and it seems to be helping him. So take that for what it's worth. So maybe DJ's putting will be improved here a little bit. That's possible. So again, though, that's like I said, though, this isn't even that negative here at minus 0.26 here for DJ. So it's like, it's not even that big of a negative thing that I wouldn't even worry about it one way or the other. So DJ's a fine play. Don't think he's he's not like my super favorite play or like a stone cold lock, but I think there's nothing wrong with playing him in GPPs. I probably wouldn't do him in cash just because of for the price, and you could get a couple more guys down here at the 10K, upper 9K range that I think have just pretty much as equal of a chance. But GPP wise, obviously with what DJ can do, makes perfect sense. Moving on to Jason Day, I don't really have much to add on to Jason Day other than what I've said in past episodes, so I won't waste like your guys' time here too much. The only thing I will say is I do think his approach game is coming around since he started hitting his new irons. With what he did at not only the Players' Championship but Wells Fargo, he was only like slightly above average at Wells Fargo where he won, but he looked better with his approach game at the Players' Championship. I think he's actually making good steps there now that he's gotten more tournaments and practice under his belt, just kind of getting back into the thick of things this season, and since he's got his new irons going. So I do think that even though Jason Day is, I'll scroll over here. Oops. Oh, shoot. Sorry about that. I just misclicked on the tab. I'll get that out of here. Where are we? Sheet 22. There you are. Okay, good. Sorry about that, guys. I have a lot of tabs on this document. So I'm sliding this over for Jason Day. Right here, 153rd in strokes gained approaching the green. So obviously this isn't very good from the overall season, but I do think this number is going to be trending in the right direction here as the next several tournaments play out. So wouldn't worry about that too much. And then obviously the strokes gained putting is running very hot right now. 1.4, not sustainable. But I will say that I do believe that Jason Day, again, is the best putter on tour. You've heard me say that. We predict him at a 0.55 right now, according to the model, for how well he has been putting here this year. And just kind of factoring in the last few years, you can obviously that Jason Day is clearly an above average putter at at worst. I mean, he's clearly one of the best. So this 0.55 is actually a fairly reasonable take. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things here for Day. GPP-wise, I don't think he's going to garner a ton of ownership. Jason Day's kind of like, it's a little bit interesting. Justin Rose used to be the guy that, like, nobody would play in GPPs. Like, he could do pretty much about anything, like as far as results go, and he would still like never be more than like 15% on ever. Jason Day's kind of, I have a feeling is going to be falling into that trap here a little bit, unless he like, you know, wins another major, or like he really takes over like the #1 spot in the world, just because you know, there's so many good players right now and everything like that. It just doesn't seem like Day is really getting the same love as he once did a few years ago. And so I think kind of a similar thing to DJ. I think he's a good play in GPPs. Probably not what I would go with in cash, though. But everything else is perfectly fine with Day. Moving on to Rory. Obviously, he was in contention there at the BMW over in Europe this past week. Ended up finishing second to Francesco Molinari. Of course, the amount of million times I've recommended Molinari, of course, he then goes ahead and wins on the Euro Tour, so now he's going to get a bump in ownership, which is just freaking fantastic. But so that's the way it goes sometimes. Rory, yes. Rory, everything looks pretty good here for Rory. Sliding over here for his approach game, he is a 52nd in approaching the green. So Rory's approach game's holding pretty solid here, around top 50 or so, after he got off to a slow start with the approach game of the year, but it's been pretty rock solid here over the last couple of months, as you would expect. The putter continues to be fine. Obviously, the statistics from BMW would not translate to strokes gained statistics, just because it is a European Tour event, and they do these are only PGA Tour statistics. And so when it comes to Rory here, though, I'm probably leaning away from Rory if you're only making a couple lineups, or I would limit your ownership into him if you're making a ton of lineups. For the main reason, actually, is just that because he played last week in Europe. I'm not big on playing golfers who travel cross country just like and played a tournament like right there the week before, because obviously Rory, the earliest he would have gone into Ohio over in the Columbus area is Monday. Maybe it's even going to be Tuesday. I have no idea what his travel schedule is exactly, but that's the earliest he could be in, and that's just a lot of jet lag to accumulate just when you've got to play 4 consecutive days. I've talked about this before in the past, where it's just one of those things where, like, if you just have to play like 18 holes of golf at one point and get your body ready, that's fine. But to do it for 4 consecutive days, to be physically and mentally sharp, coming off the jet lag like that, it's not my favorite thing to do usually, especially when it comes to a popular player like Rory. If it's somebody that's going to have like low ownership, then it's another story. You can just throw in like a little bit of ownership, and it's nice to have. But for somebody like Rory, I probably would just lean away with so many other great options near the top here. And so other than that, though, I got really nothing negative to say about McIlroy. Justin Rose here, moving on here, $10,600 on DraftKings. He's actually the most expensive on FanDuel. I found that a little bit interesting after he won at Colonial last week. Played extremely well, obviously, especially over the last handful, especially over the weekend, I should say, is really where Rose took over, or I guess kind of held him all off on Sunday. But anyways, so it's well done by Rose. Rose is playing extremely well. He has made all 14 of his cuts that he has played this year. That's I think he's the only golfer to make every single cut who has played at least 14 events. It looks like actually there's a couple others. Oh wow, like Emiliano Grillo and Brandon Grace have too. I guess there's a few guys that maybe had, but so at least he's, as far as the top players who are playing in like the top tournaments all the time. Justin Rose seems to be the one nailing on all cylinders the most from a consistency standpoint. Last few results, obviously, like I just said, he won a Colonial at Fort Worth, tied for 23 at the Players, tied for 12th at the Masters, 52nd at Houston, fell off a little there, but 3rd at Arnold Palmer, 5th at Valspar. He's had a pretty darn good season. Statistically here for Rose, I will just point out here, because this is the one thing I was knocking Rose on a little bit earlier on in the year, was just that his approach game had been pretty bad, but Rose's approach game has just been on fire here over the last few weeks. He's gone all the way up to 23rd. He's been killing it with approach shots. That's a really good sign coming into Memorial. So it is really hard for me being anti-Rose here. But I'm going to do the best I can because, A, He will get a lot of ownership probably because of him winning last week. And he's playing that well. And I don't think a lot of people are too thrilled with Jordan Spieth and the way he's putting right now. I know JT's right there with him and Rory's right there with him, so I guess he can't be that highly owned. But given the way he's just been crushing it and the people are going to see the approach game, he's going to garner a lot of ownership. And the second thing I will point out here, as you can see, he is putting at a .618 this year. So our regression tool expects a minus 0.6 out of him. So there's enough negative things here that I will say Rose is not my favorite play in GPPs. And even in cash format, I'm going to touch on him here in a second. I prefer Justin Thomas over Justin Rose. So it's one of those things where if you're making a ton of lineups, I get it if you don't want to fade Justin Rose. But if you're just making like a couple or a few lineups, I'd probably actually go a different direction, as hard as that may be. I understand he's playing extremely well. It's just kind of an ownership type of a thing. And strokes gained putting regression, that's where I would factor that in. So I will move on to Justin Thomas. JT checks every box possible that you could want coming in here for the most part. Recent results: tied for 11th at the Players, tied for 21st at Wells Fargo, tied for 17th at the Masters, second at Mexico, won the Honda. So and that's all the way back obviously in March and in late February. So JT, you're getting a great price here, I think, for him at $10,300. That is an outstanding price for somebody who's playing extremely well right now. And if you look at the strokes gained statistics right here, you will see he is 4th in strokes gained total, 3rd tee to green, 16th off the tee, 7th approaching the green, 39th around, 42nd putting, and we're only expecting a tiny bit of negative putting regression from him right here at minus 0.24. That's really good for all intents and purposes. So JT is probably my favorite play here of everybody that is above $10,000. He's probably my favorite play just in cash and GPPs. He'll get some ownership, sure, but I don't think it's going to be that high because of what I cited just about Justin Rose. And, Spieth will get a little bit, I guess. And then you got Ricky Fowler below him, and I'm sure Fowler will still garner some a little bit. But and then if you just take a look at the odds per dollar here, actually, JT's odds per dollar are actually better than Rory's and Justin Rose's right here, despite being a few $100s cheaper. So that's always, a very positive sign. So JT would be my favorite kind of play of this top range. I'm going to move on to Jordan Spieth. You know my story on Spieth. It's the same old thing. Every box is checked. It's the putting. He's at a minus 0.515. His putter still is not working out. It actually went down after last week. He did not putt very well at Colonial, so we're expecting now a positive 0.78. It's getting hard, obviously, if you're riding the Spieth train and you keep getting these results. My whole thing is, if you've been doing it, I would keep doing it, because it's not like Spieth is missing cuts and just wrecking your lineups completely. Obviously, you want a better return than what you've been getting from Spieth over the last handful of weeks, but it's not like he's 100% murdering your lineups, I guess is the best positive thing I can say. But I still expect this to turn around completely because his ball striking is that good. He's 8th in strokes gained approaching the green this week, and this is a strokes gained approaching the green course. Again, I understand I wouldn't do it in cash. Probably that's not the best play. But for 9,800 for Spieth and GPPs when he won't have super high ownership, I think that's a pretty darn good idea to do it when his putter really still could turn on at any point. So I'm good with Spieth on that. Ricky Fowler, not to the same extent as Spieth, but still, Ricky, we're expecting some positive regression here for Ricky Fowler. As far as these strokes gained statistics go for Fowler right now, they're a little bit not quite Ricky-esque, but they're still not bad. 38th in tee to green, 69th off the tee, 50th in approaching. He's not in perfect form or the greatest Fowler form, but it's still not bad either. He finished 14th at Colonial, which is fine. It's not great, but it's okay. It could have been worse. He had that missed cut at the Players, obviously, where he didn't have a good first round. But T21 at Wells Fargo, finished 2nd at the Masters. He's still perfectly well within striking range. And Fowler's bread and butter usually is strokes gained approaching the green, and this is, like I said, the approaching the green golf course. So I like Fowler as well. So yeah, if you kind of get the theme here, there are a lot of plays I really like here for GPPs here, obviously, the way I mentioned it. DJ and Day, certainly for the most expensive guys. Fowler and Rose, not quite as much for the reasons I articulated. I love JT. Spieth and Fowler, obviously, fine for GPPs. I'll just kind of go down here to the last couple guys real quick. Tiger Woods. I haven't really been recommending Tiger that much this year just because he's relying so much on the short game. But the one thing I will just say here, this is, if there is a week actually to maybe kind of slide in some Tiger ownership, this may not be a bad idea. The Tiger wave, momentum, excitement has died down a little bit just because obviously the Masters was a little bit of a letdown, and the Players Championship he made that charge for a while, and then he hit the wall there toward the end. He ended up finishing tied for 11th. This does seem like a week where Tiger's ownership might not be as high as you might think. And because the strokes gained off the tee isn't as big of a deal here, and you don't have to hit driver a ton, and he could hit the 3-wood or hit stingers off the tee if he really wants to. It's not a bad course fit for him, and he is 14th in approaching the green, which is what I really like. So this wouldn't be a bad idea to slide in some GPP ownership for Tiger this week. If you're somebody that's been kind of avoiding him and you kind of want to play him and just kind of find the right time, this may not be a bad time to do it. We'll see about the U.S. Open when we get to Shinnecock, because still got to do a little bit more research on that, because usually the U.S. Open in a place like Shinnecock, I have a good feeling strokes gained off the tee is going to show up there pretty good, and I'm not going to recommend Tiger when we get to the U.S. Open, but I'm going to hold that thought, though, for confirmation on that, just to wait for further, to finish up some research on that. But for this week, not a bad idea to use Tiger, I don't think, in some GPPs just a little bit. Henrik Stenson, #1 in strokes gained approach to the green, and he did not play in the BMW last week, which I do like, because most of Stenson and Rose did not play in the BMW this past week, which I was actually kind of surprised at. But they didn't. So Stenson I really like this week. Very good in strokes gained approaching the green. He's #1 this year, actually, and he's 152nd in strokes gained around the green, and Stenson actually usually is a pretty good scrambler and chipper, and so I actually expect some positive regression out of that. So Stenson, I think, is perfectly fine in cash, and in GPPs, and I actually think cash is perfectly fine for Stenson as well. I know the odds per dollar over here don't necessarily 100% support it. Well, actually, it kind of does a little bit. I don't know what the exact optimized a lineup technically is according to some of the models out there yet, or according to like what I would even say versus just based upon odds per dollar. But you get to see actually odds per dollar here. It's not too bad here. Getting a 4.21 here at 9,200. That's pretty solid. So, and then Hideki, I'll just wrap it up here with Hideki at 9,100. I've been pretty pro Hideki, has not worked out too well. His strokes gained approaching the green is not seeming to really improve. It's still kind of struggling a little bit. And then even his strokes gained off the tee actually has suffered a little bit even as of late. And so I don't really like that coming from Hideki. And so it's just one of those things where I would say, if you're like Hideki and Spieth have been the two guys that have been kind of colder based upon what their usual performance is that I've been recommending, and neither have kind of worked out. I feel better about a Spieth bounce back than a Hideki bounce back as of right now, just because it's so clear with the putter for Spieth and his ball striking so good. With Hideki, his putter is actually slightly negative right now, and his approach game is still a little meh, and his strokes gained off the tee is now all of a sudden a little meh. I would say it's okay to back off on Hideki. I think for this, just take kind of a wait and see approach for him. And just because his price is 9,100, which I think is a fair price rather than like extremely good value. If he were down in that lower 8K range like he was for the Players Championship, then I might kind of expect like a lower ownership. Then I might say it's worth a better play. But I don't know, for 9,100 for what the ball striking's all of a sudden turned into this week, I think it's okay to actually just sit on Hideki this week, or you can put a little ownership to him, I guess, like in GPPs if you want to. That's fine, but not as much into him right now. I've seen enough kind of from Hideki just to kind of take a wait and see approach. I'm guessing Danny and Max are probably disagreeing with me on that, but that's just my 2 cents on it. So, all right, we'll wrap it up there. I'll hit up some with you guys on the forum with some other plays that I like in the cheaper price range, in the cheaper ranges, obviously. Touch on DraftKings. You can ask me about FanDuel on there as well, of course. I usually just get most of the questions are about DraftKings, so I usually do these episodes more just based upon DraftKings. But if you got questions about FanDuel, hit me up on the forum or hit me up on Twitter as usual. So thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe to our videos in the YouTube channel, and the Twitter account by now. So all right, good luck everybody.